Thank you very much for having me, Atheism UK and the Origin Project. And of course, it's a huge pleasure and honor to be here with such distinguished speakers. I'd like to speak on apostasy, blasphemy, and rebellious women, and how the woman life freedom revolution in Iran is leading a woman-led radical enlightenment. Now, this revolution is subverting the Islamic ideals of womanhood. You know, a woman has to be submissive, silent, unheard, unseen. And what we're seeing unfolding in Iran is the resistance of free women, of disobedient women, of rebellious women, hand in hand with men and people who understand very clearly that women's suppression has been used to suppress all of society, and that women's freedom is a measure of the freedom in any given society. This revolution is modern, it's secular, it's anti-clerical, and it's anti-Islamic. And this should be unsurprising after decades of Islamic rule that hates women, where women and girls have faced the brunt of the violence of this regime as a pillar of its rule, and also with the hijab as a political banner. Now, just to give you an example of some of the sermons that people hear day in and day out on state TV and during Friday prayers.
تبارک و تعالی چند قسم حیوان خلق کرده. یک قسم حیوان خلق کرده برای اینکه مردم وسیله سفر باشه براشون. اسب، شتر، این حیوانات چارپاست که مردم ازش استفاده میکنن برای سفرهاشون. این یک قسم حیوانه. یک قسم حیوان خدا خلق کرده که وسیله غذای مردمه و اون مثل گاو و گوسفنده که خدا اینها را خلق کرده برای اینکه وسیله غذای مردم باشه. و یک قسم حیوان خلق کرده و اون زنها و خانمها هستن. اینا عین گاو و گوسفند هستن، حیوان هستن، ولکن و خدا خلقشون کرده برای استفاده مردها، فقط واسه که مردا وحشت نکنن این زنها را به شکل خود انسان خلق کرده، اگر نه اینها عین همون گاو و گوسفند و عین همون اسب و شتر و الاغ هست.
تجاوز به حقوق دیگران، بدحجابی ها، اون آرایش کردن ها، اگر هدف این نباشه که من و شما رو تحت تاثیر قرار بده، تو فکر من و شما نفوذ کنه، چه هدفی داره؟
And of course, we know it's not just in Iran, but Islamic misogyny is something that we see the world over. Listen to this video.
النسوية الحركة العالمية هذه ضد الشرع، ضد كل شيء. النسوية التي تتصدرها أوروبا وأمريكا وتخرج من هناك، هذه النسوية ضد الدين. هذه النسوية تقول لا قوامة للرجل على المرأة، والله تبارك وتعالى يقول الرجال قوامون على النساء. لا يمكن أن تكون نسوية وتقول الرجال قوامون على النساء. إذن ترفض هذه الآية، لأن النسوية ترفض أن يكون الرجل قائما على المرأة. النسوية ترفض أن يكون للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين، والله تبارك وتعالى يقول للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين. النسوية تقول للذكر مثل حظ الأنثى. النسوية تمنع أن يعدد الرجل زوجاته، والله تبارك وتعالى يقول وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاثة ورباع. النسوية تقول لا، ما فيه، بل هن ضد الزواج أصلا النسوية. والحركة النسوية العالمية ترى المثلية اللي هي الشذوذ، ما ترى الزواج ولا ترى الطلاق بيد الرجل لو حصل الزواج. والله تبارك وتعالى فإن طلقتموهن، إذا طلقتم النساء يا أيها النبي إذا طلقتم النساء، يقول لا، الطلاق ليس بيد الرجل. وغير ذلك كثير من أمور الشرع النسوية لا تقبلها، لا تقبل أن الرجل أفضل من المرأة. والله تبارك وتعالى الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. الله جل وعلا يقول وليس الذكر كالأنثى. النسوية تقول الذكر كالأنثى، فلا يمكن أن تكون نسوية على القانون الأجنبي ثم تقول إنها مؤمنة بالله، لا يمكن. النسوية تقول لا ولاية الرجل على المرأة، والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول لا نكاح إلا بولي. النسوية ترفض ذلك، فلا يمكن أن تكون المرأة نسوية حقيقية أو رجل يعني يتبنى الفكر النسوي ثم بعد ذلك يقول إنه يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. فالآن إذا جاءنا أحد وقال أنا أتبنى الفكر النسوي، نقول إذا كان يتبناه بما هو عليه عندهم لأنهم أساسه، هذا كفر بالله تبارك وتعالى.
I don't know why I'm here, because I think they speak volumes. I don't need to really explain further. But it's absurd that we continuously hear that what happens to women in Islamic states is un-Islamic, it's not the real Islam. But clearly the source of this hatred against women is in the Quran, it's in the Hadith, which is the sayings and actions of Muhammad, Islam's prophet, and it's in Islamic jurisprudence. Just one example of a Hadith which says that most of the people found in hell are women. Most probably they don't want to be one of the 72 virgins in heaven, which explains a lot. And despite all these efforts to save Islam, clearly, we know very clearly that you cannot confront a religious theocracy without confronting its ideology. Hence why there's a tsunami of atheism in Iran, and there's a trending hashtag which says Ridam be Islam, which is basically I shit on Islam. And it started when a woman was being followed on an escalator, and she was told, and it was videotaped, she was told, you need to respect the hijab. This is Islam, this is the country's laws. And she said, I shit on your Islam. And that's how it became a trending hashtag. Now, this is the woman's Quran that we've created. And I've got some for our wonderful speakers today. It's basically blank, because it didn't take very long to write, because there really is nothing good in the Quran for women. And faced with this hatred of religion that is very much alive in Iranian society, and after all, religion is just an idea, a very bad idea that deserves contempt and criticism, we are met with the usual excuses and justifications. Islamic feminists like Amina Wadud, for example, will say that women's equality is realized in Islam if we contextualize the text or reinterpret patriarchal interpretations. But I'm sorry, isn't the Quran divine, perfect, timeless? And do tell, how does one realize women's equality within inequality and misogyny? As the Iranian worker communist said, Mansur Hekmat, the doctrinal and Quranic foundations of Islam, the development of Islam's history, and the political identity and affiliation of Islam and Islamists in the battle between reaction and freedom in our era are too obvious to allow the debate on various interpretations of Islam and the existence or likelihood of other interpretations to be taken seriously. It shows the utmost contempt for the science and social intelligence of our times. He goes on to say, in Islam, be it true or untrue, the individual has no rights or dignity. In Islam, the woman is a slave. The child is on par with animals. Free thinking is a sin deserving of punishment. Music is corrupt. Sex without permission and religious certification is the greatest of sins. This is the religion of death. In reality, all religions are such, but most religions have been restrained by free-thinking and freedom-loving humanity over hundreds of years. This one has never been restrained or controlled, I would say, until now. The revolution in Iran, similar to the French Revolution, aims to restrain religion and push it out of the state and the public space. It's no wonder that the revolution is woman-led. In Islam and Islamic states, anything that benefits women is haram, religiously prohibited. Your hair, your body, your dance, your voice, your disobedience, your free thought, your resistance, haram, haram, haram. But anything that is violence and hate against women, that's halal, religiously prescribed, child marriage, polygamy, domestic violence, sex apartheid, which is like race apartheid, but based on sex. That's halal. Stoning people to death is halal. Just make sure you use the right size of stone to ensure maximum torture and death. Here's a discussion I had with one Islamist, Abdulusi, who was supporting death by stoning.
If you agree with stoning, that's your view and you're entitled to it. But give us a solid answer.
It's not my view. I'm only reporting the Islamic law, which states that adulterers are executed if they make their adultery public.
Do you condemn that the stoning of Islamic women, or men even, who make that public in the way in which you've described?
Are you telling me that do I condemn Islamic law?
Do you condemn people being stoned?
Well, that's what he's saying. He can't because...
Yes or no?
Wait a second. Why is it relevant what I...
Because you're here talking about...
You want to spend the last half an hour defending tyranny. That's what you've been doing.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Because who says you have a right to commit adultery and cheat on your partner?
Who says you can stone someone to death because they have sex outside of
The
marriage?
state has
Do you understand that?
The state has the
How
monopoly.
dare you?
State-
How dare you say that someone can be
Monopoly.
stoned because they have sex outside of marriage? How dare you? I don't agree with executions in the US. I don't agree with executions anywhere. But you will accept
Yet it exists.
You're laying on it. How dare you? You should be ashamed of your head.
I'm glad we got there. I'm glad we got there.
Finally.
I'm glad we got there.
I think it's sometimes what's not said that's most powerful.
I think what's important to note here too is that while we have Islamic reformers, as we know, if they live in Islamic states, they're either in prison or dead. That we know very clearly that hudud laws, which includes the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy, and the law that allows for stoning to death because of adultery, they are considered fixed and mandated and cannot be changed. The hunting of disobedient women in Iran and under Islamic states for transgressions is a reminder, really. It reminds one of the witch hunts that we saw in Europe over 3 centuries, where hundreds and thousands of disobedient women were terrorized and burnt at the stake. Because of the need to control the process of reproduction, and also historically this has been the case, women's sexuality is seen as diabolical, says Silvia Federici in her book, Witches, Witch Hunting in Women. It's a social threat that needs to be controlled and repressed into the realm of acceptable female social behavior. And when you look at the exaggeration of the crimes of witches, for example, to mythical proportions, it helped to justify the horrendous punishments as an effective means to terrorize a whole society. And this is exactly the case we see in Iran, for example. Unveiled women are blamed for everything from earthquakes to natural disasters to rivers running dry. Hence why a woman who flouts compulsory veiling laws can get up to 10 years in prison, and why when security forces shoot at women in protest, they target their eyes and their breasts and their genitals. We also see the same claims made against women accused of being witches, as we see accusations being made against women who flout veiling rules. Their crimes, lewdness, prostitution, disturbing the peace and stability, a source of chaos and fitna in society. All accusations that I have been proudly called by the regime and others. The unrelenting repression of disobedient women, it aims to show the power of the state and religion and what happens if you resist. Now, this is a picture of Skull's bridle, which was used in Europe until the 18th century. It's an instrument of punishment and to humiliate women. It was an iron muzzle that enclosed the head, was slid into the mouth and pressed down on the top of the tongue, often with a spike on the tongue as a compress. It functioned to silence and cause extreme pain and physiological trauma to scare and intimidate the wearer into submission. It was used primarily on women. Doesn't it look a lot like the niqab and hijab, a fabric version of the Skull's bridle, to humiliate, to silence, and to force into submission? Maybe Luke Perry can do a statue to celebrate the women who wore Skull's bridles after his statue celebrating the hijab is installed in Birmingham. Hijab is a source of humiliation of women. Using the term choice when it is a religious imposition that's often imposed with sheer violence, or at least the threat of, is obscene. And to do it on the anniversary of the murder of Kurdish Iranian Mahsa Jina Amini. This is our Jina, lying brain dead at Castro Hospital in Tehran after she was brutally beaten for improper veiling. She died on 16 September last year, murdered for a few strands of hair. If you want to talk about the hijab, this is the hijab. This is women being arrested by morality police. This is the hijab, a real-life handmaid's tale. This is the hijab.
تو غلط میکنی
This is hijab not just for women in Iran, but women across the globe, including right here in Birmingham. According to the Syrian Marxist Sadiq al-Azm, in his defense of Salman Rushdie, he said, in the face of cultural chauvinism, conservative parochialism, and narcissistic particularism, the deep-seated and silent assumption in the West remains that Muslims, or those who are portrayed or seen as such, are simply not worthy of serious dissidence. They don't deserve them, and they're ultimately incapable of producing them, for in the final analysis, it is the theocracy of the Ayatollahs that become them. Which is why, here in the West, we must endure the celebration of World Hijab Day, whilst in Iran, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia, and right here in Europe, women and girls are being killed for refusing to wear it. Iran is the scene of a woman life freedom revolution that is modern, secular, anti-clerical, and anti-religious. And it's showing very clearly that women's culture, the culture of resisting people, is not the same as the culture of the ruling theocratic elite. That the celebration of the hijab celebrates the Islamists, the femiciders, and not women. In Iran, we are not celebrating the hijab. We are celebrating the removal and burning of the hijab. We're witnessing not misogynist modesty rules, but the body rioting and raging against Islamic morality. A revolution led by Generation Z, the first generation with portable digital technology in their palms right from the beginning, who have no illusions towards an Islamic state. They don't want an Islamic state, they don't want a misogynist state. That is some of the major slogans that are being heard on the streets of Iran. Despite the many threats, you must have heard that over 600 protesters were killed, 18 to 20,000 people were arrested. The regime used weapons of war, used rape as a weapon of torture, and has been arresting civil society, women's rights, and trade union activists as well to try to silence protests, including harassing and imprisoning and arresting families of those who've been killed. And despite the threats, we now have a country that, despite compulsory veiling rules, there are women walking the streets unveiled.
Cameras are being installed in public places in Iran to identify women who are not wearing the hijab. According to Iranian officials, women who are caught on camera will be sent a warning by text message. The increase in surveillance is part of the ruling regime's crackdown on women who are challenging the country's compulsory dress code. It's a movement that's grown since the death of Mahsa Amini. The 22-year-old died while she was in custody of Iran's infamous Islamic morality police after being detained for improperly wearing her hijab.
The regime has sentenced women who've been arrested for not wearing the hijab to wash dead bodies for several months, to up to 10 years in prison. And nonetheless, women are walking the streets unveiled. I think what we're seeing now is that despite the repression and the risks, the tide has turned, and there really is no turning back. It's the beginning of the end for this regime. And as Karl Marx says, the criticism of religion is the presupposition of all criticism. And what we're witnessing in Iran today is a historic fight that will pave the way for progress and a new vision of society where religion is discredited, loses its privilege, and has no place in the public space. It would be relegated to a private affair, as it should always be. And I want to show you some examples of this. Take 9-year-old Kian Pir Falak. He was shot by security agents and killed. This is his mother at his funeral. This is Majid Reza Rahnavard. He's one of the first young men who supported the Women Life Revolution, who was taken and executed. This is him flanked by his executioners. He's blindfolded. He is on his way to being executed, being interviewed by Iranian state TV. This is his last will and testament.
وصیت‌نامه چی نوشتی شما؟
کجا خاکم کنم؟ دوست ندارم گریه کنم سر مزار.
دوست نداری قرآن بخونم؟ دوست نداری برات نماز بخونم؟ دیگه
نماز نخونم. شادی کنم. آهنگ شاد پخش.
And the anti-religious hatred and anti-clericalism is very clear in all the new revolutionary songs that are being sung. Here's one of them. I think it's interesting, when it talks about the calloused forehead, it's the prayer stone. I don't know what it's called in English. But in English, what do they call it? Anyway, the thing you put your forehead on, you get a calloused forehead, and it's also cursing that. So I think it just shows the sort of anti-religious sentiment. We've talked a lot about Iran being a center of an anti-Islamic backlash, and I think through this woman life freedom revolution, we're seeing that. This revolution is the epitome of changing minds in changing times. With Rojava, which is a center of secularism in a war zone, in Syrian Kurdistan, these two places and this region really is a center of this era's radical enlightenment, rejecting all compromise with the past and challenging religion, traditional morality, and political authority. And it continues in various forms despite all the repression and pressure. We hope that soon there will be monuments in the name of Jina Mahsa Amini and rebellious women, not the hijab. Monuments for the heretics, for the blasphemers, for the apostates. Change is coming in the form of a new enlightenment, thanks to Rojava and Iran. It's our historical task to defend it. This is a great placard at one of the protests. It says that in the end, if there is only one of us women left to dance on your graves, that will be enough. Thank you.